All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone who has tuned into our webinar. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy days to join our webinar about performance management. I'm your moderator, Nick Azad, and I'm joined today by two of my fellow Parsec colleagues, Corey Bodbarka, our manufacturing expert and resident Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, and Christopher Gray, our software application engineer. To quickly bring you up to speed on who Parsec is, we've been in business for over 30 years with a dedicated focus exclusively on developing manufacturing operations management software, which you may hear us abbreviate MOM. Our TrakSYS solution platform is designed to measurably help our customers without the need for disruption and major infrastructure overhaul. TrakSYS has been deployed in thousands of locations in over 100 different countries. We've helped customers in a variety of industries, from food and beverage, pharmaceutical, CPG, and chemical, to name a few, to significantly improve their manufacturing operations. Today, we will be focusing on performance management. Now, as before, we've reached out to a handful of our customers in advance of this webinar to get a gauge on common issues around performance, as well as topics of interest. To address the information, we will begin by discussing the challenges we heard, follow that up with a demonstration of how TrakSYS helps solve those issues, and then end with an open Q&A session. So, Corey, my first question, we were talking last week about measuring performance and how it can provide visibility for bottlenecks, not only in production, but throughout the entire supply chain. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Sure. Every manufacturing operation strives for world-class performance, but the fact of the matter is the majority of all manufacturers face a variety of challenges every day. Early in the continuous improvement journey, we tend to focus on improving shop floor capacity issues, things like equipment breakdowns, quality issues, changeovers, etc. Because of these reliability issues that exist within manufacturing, supply chains typically mask these issues with large safety stocks to prevent delivery issues. But as we create more stable, reliable, and higher performing shop floor processes, we also need to increase the velocity of the supply chain. If this doesn't happen, we begin to expose new bottlenecks and waste in other areas. So it's equally important to measure performance, not just on the shop floor, but across the supply chain, as well as in operational support functions.
Mm-hmm. So that makes a lot of sense. I can see how, supply chain can affect performance of a manufacturing plant. How can digitalization then help the manufacturing and supply chains function better together?
So manufacturing collects more data than any other business out there. However, outside of the largest companies, manufacturers still are largely very pencil and paper. So data remains an island throughout our factories and in a variety of systems that don't necessarily communicate with each other. So this prevents quick communications and decision making from happening, and in the sharing of information that's going on within the heartbeat of manufacturing with the supply chain. When I used to run factories, the majority of the broader supply chain conversations were periodic calls, sometimes daily, but more like weekly in a lot of cases, and they revolved around these massive spreadsheets. Many of the planning activities were done based on sales forecasts instead of being demand-driven pull schedules, and inventories were planned with buffer stocks. In a lot of cases, inventory was transported when timing was close and the activity was convenient to actually take place, instead of precisely synchronizing the production activities. So although this process really works, it brings a lot of inherent waste with it. Clutter, additional transportation, material handling, inventory carrying costs, and even worse, additional warehouse space to hold these inventories that aren't necessarily needed. This ties up valuable working capital that can really stifle cash flow, and cash flow that can be used for new investments in products and facility enhancements. So if you think about it, administration of the supply chain functions is very high, and decisions are often made with transactional data systems and infrequent communications that don't allow us to really be as agile as we can be. But when an intelligent digital mesh arises, content, services, things, and most important, people are connected together. It involves reorganizing how information flows. So smart factories are connected within the four walls of manufacturing, but by synchronizing the supply chain, this goes beyond the four walls, sharing visibility between suppliers, producers, service providers, and even customers, enabling precisely timed decision-making, execution, and rapid continuous improvement of processes.
So, we've discussed factories having challenges with managing spending and possibly missing budgets. Why don't accounting departments track spending in real time?
That's a great question. So accounting departments typically use a traditional method of tracking full overhead costs and allocating those costs to the total products manufactured during a specific time frame. So it's often done monthly with month-end close. An example of this would be how a factory uses electricity all month. They receive a bill at the end of the billing period, and the bill is actually accounted for across the production volume for that period. Same goes for other production materials consumed, which adds to the overall cost per unit of a factory. Mm-hmm. But you can see how this method of accounting, it doesn't really provide regular visibility for spending versus budget. And addressing overspending is done in the rearview mirror at the end of the month because of the fact that there's no visibility day by day. So another method of accounting is what they call activity-based costing, which allocates the cost of activities to specific products or jobs that use these activities. Now, this is great, but it can be very complex. It's often difficult for cost accountants to track the many different production activities that happen in detail enough to allocate those costs in a useful manner. Mm-hmm. And it's not really feasible for them to do this frequently enough to take timely actions. So TrakSYS, can track many of these activities in real time. Activities like material consumption, energy, labor, maintenance materials, as well as maintenance activities, which you may have seen in some of our other webinars. Now factories have different products and processes, so as a result, they have different cost drivers. For example, a factory doing manual assembly will have a really large portion of its total cost be labor. And a factory that runs, say, furnaces is likely to have a larger portion of its total cost be energy. And a heavily automated plant may be burdened more by maintenance cost. So it's not necessary to develop a full financial model within TrakSYS to better your management of spending, but having a good understanding of what are the largest cost drivers within your facility so you can set priorities for where you may benefit from more frequent activity-based costing. Mm-hmm. By having this increased visibility, we enable managing spending against budgets and prevent being caught by a surprise at the end of the month.
That all makes sense. So I guess my last question for you, doesn't this thought of visibility kind of go beyond the plant and supply chain?
Yeah, absolutely. So not only does enterprise visibility make it easy to, for work to be passed between individuals or groups, or for individuals to work collaboratively, it also makes it easier to work and pass information and activities between the different business functions. So a lot like the smart factory, it's just taking a broader approach and allowing us to benefit across the entire enterprise. We can experience things like better visibility into operations so the supply chain can better synchronize their activities to what's going on, allowing users to quickly determine when things are out of sync and make adjustments, and leverage all the enterprise resources. So sometimes we can share resources between plants, to make up for shortfalls in certain areas. And it also provides identification for improvement opportunities throughout the enterprise, with broader benchmarking, collaborative continuous improvement, and standardization to sustain those performance gains that we get. Information also becomes self-service, so it reduces the request for information between the functions. And it allows streamlining workflows and synchronizing activities across the business and supply chain. So before we jump into the demonstration, I want to start with a little background on the architecture of the TrakSYS MOM platform. TrakSYS uses a real-time logic service to communicate with the automation on the plant floor, and a data management service to communicate with third-party business systems like ERP, maintenance systems, quality systems, to name a few. This enables TrakSYS to empower its users by executing tasks and workflows across the value stream while providing actionable intelligence. TrakSYS can be accessed through any web browser interface. This allows the users to interact with the user interfaces and further contextualize data as they carry out the manufacturing process. As I mentioned, TrakSYS can be accessed through any web interface. Since it's built on HTML5, it's responsive to a variety of mobile devices, as you see on the screen. By enabling mobility, it allows executives, managers, as well as operators to be provided with the visibility, knowledge, and control they need to achieve their operational goals. So I now want to turn things over to Christopher. He's going to be walking us through a live demonstration of TrakSYS and show how he can measure performance across the supply chain, production, and production support functions.
Thank you, Corey. All right, give me just one moment. I'm going to hop into our demonstration environment and give you guys a look at how everything they've been talking about can be addressed using the TrakSYS software. Let me pop this open real quick. There we are. All right, and for today, we're going to be looking, as Corey mentioned, at an entire supply chain overview, looking at performance management from a ton of different perspectives. Now, for this, I am first going to start out by taking a look at our Orange County vitamin, showing you a lot of the different concepts and, well, sections of the implementation and the different types of information that we gather. A lot of this information is already covered in some of our other webinars in much more details. So for today, we are going to be staying a little bit higher level with the information that we cover. If you wish to see more information about a specific solution, be sure to check out the other webinars available on our website. What we will be covering today, though, that is unique, is how this information can be used across the different business units and across the different areas of an implementation or facility to help take one part and make the other sections better as a whole. To begin with, we're going to start out by looking at these first two sections here, planning and warehousing. These two sections are essentially going to set the baseline for a lot of the information that is going to be used for the process portions. After we cover those, we'll look at an example of a batch record relevant to the three production areas in my implementation, which are batching, tableting, and packaging. And then we'll look at some additional context in the format of maintenance, as well as some of the quality information, particularly the SPC. Afterwards, we'll wrap back finally to get back to the supply chain page to show one last time how all that information can be presented in a way that can give you quick overviews of all the information, and we'll point out some monetary benefits to them as well. To start with, though, planning and warehousing. This first screen here is an example of a management by exception screen specific towards the planning capabilities. You'll see as I pop open warehousing, we're going to have a very similar looking screen in essentially, in this case, in the exact same format. These two screens are both designed for the purposes of showing key metrics that are going on in those specific areas of interest. With this type of a page, you are able to tell, well, those key metrics and how they're doing. And if they are falling short, you should be able to identify potential reasons for why they're falling short, as well as things that you have done so far to try to address those shortcomings. In the case of planning, you can see our basic metrics that we're using here include on time and in full for our performance schedule. If either of these are falling behind, we can look at a couple different reasons why that might be occurring. It could be things like failure causes due to certain material needs. Maybe I'm short on bottles or tablets, or an intermediary product that I'm producing. This allows me to find potential reasons that I can address by going further into more details in other portions of this section. However, I don't have to go very far, at least, to figure out where I want to begin. With all the rest of this data as well, there's other ways you can group this, of course. You're seeing in here some basic grouping, like by a specific asset or line. You're seeing me slice it up a little bit by shifts, and you're seeing if there's certain patterns on certain days. Hopefully that provides some additional context to the data. In addition, you should be able to see how you're reacting to this information. In the case of planning, as things go wrong, most likely you're making some changes to your schedules. As you can see on the right hand here, as kind of my final fallback for data collection, I also have schedule change logs, where as any changes are being made to my schedule, the order of the jobs, or where they're being done, I do request that they create a log where I can view all of the logs in chronological order here to get a quick view of recent changes in my history. We're going to see a very similar pattern to that with warehousing. In this case, I am still doing it on time and full, but I'm doing it in a little bit of a different breakdown, doing it by supplier and by shipping. And in fact, you'll see another metric for it later on. But in here, in the same idea, if I'm falling behind any of these categories, I can look to a couple of different reasons why I might be having issues. Perhaps I'm having defective products that are escaping. Perhaps I'm having, well, a lot of inventory on hand and that can be causing issues, or I have very fast turnover where I'm shipping out faster than I'm receiving, and that can be causing issues on another end. You might be able to see failure causes where certain materials are the specific reasons. So this is actually more in depth than what planning showed a second ago, where you can see what specific type of material is causing my problems. I appear to be running low on batching raw materials whenever I need them, and it's accounting for approximately almost 3% of my failure times, or at least my delays in my schedule. In the same idea, you have your metrics, you have potential reasons, or at least potential flags as to why they might be having issues. And you also have over here additional log entries, in this case towards cycle counts and receipts of material to help pinpoint what those specific issues may be. Now, to swap gears slightly, we're going to take a look at the actual production portion. So hopefully this information sets up very well what you intend to produce and what materials are going into it. But performance management isn't just the preparation portion, it's a lot to do with the process tracking as well. So if I go over to quality over here, we're actually going to bypass these three sections, and instead of looking at them individually, I'm going to look at them together as a whole. I have this specific job here that I'm loading, job 3614, where I produce some agile. This entire process is contained within my facility, so it involves all three parts of my process of batching, tabulating, and packaging. And if I go to overview, you can see all three of them here. I can see every bit of information and at least the very high-level metrics for a lot of the different components of my process. I can see the batching process itself, all the steps taken in that process, where I had overages and it took too long, where I used materials and alternatives, the different checks and tests I might have done on that specific batch, and even if there's any failed, and there was one late, but well, at least it passed. I can see the same thing for tabulating and packaging as well, where you have the same type of information, except instead of the actual batch recipe, we're tracking a different KPI. In my case, I've elected to use OEE. This is a wonderful starting point in a much different format than you saw previously, but it does contain a lot of data. And most importantly, as mentioned, all this data is relevant to one another. So you have the ability to connect this information across the different business units. I can see my batching information and all my tabulating packaging material consumptions in my quality section, but if I wanted more information, I can select into one of them. I can see the very specific records. In fact, I can see one alternate that was used here, and I can start to compare those. If I wanted to see even more details, this can even take me to the specific reports within the other section. For example, if I want to see what happened with this specific alternative, I can trace it. There's my trace full information for it. I can get to the genealogy tree and whatnot from here, but it's all in my warehousing section. Or I can go all back and I can look at the entire batch report. If I select the report up here, here's the product and material portion of the report relevant to that specific batch. This puts all the information in a highly contextualized format where you can see, once again, various core metrics, such as this information here. You can see where there might be potential issues and what might have gone wrong. And then from there, you can go through and see more details and potentially drill into it to see what you're doing to correct it. Let's give two more examples of this. We're going to take a look at the SVC and the maintenance variants of these screens as well. The SVC and the maintenance ones, just like before, are very similar to what you saw in planning and warehousing, but different metrics, different reasons, different breakdowns. For my SVC, we're looking at things like my sample subgroups, pass and fail rates. We're seeing when it fails, why it failed, by the different violations and rules that I've identified. We're seeing various metrics like capability and process indexes to allow you to see how you're actually performing. From the top here and my metrics down here, I should very easily be able to tell if we're performing well or within an acceptable range based upon any metrics that I would like. And then based upon the violations here and the chart here, I should be able to see why they're failing. And potentially as they fail, I can request additional information and get specifics from the operators as they input all the information and data. Maintenance is going to follow a very similar pattern where I can see the work orders, which ones are waiting for scheduled and assignments, what my backlog looks like. I can see if they're more preventative or reactive. I can see reasons why things are failing. Potentially I can address different downtime codes, or as you can see, I have a lot of mechanical failures and jams and adjustments. Those might be related, in fact. I can see perhaps which assets or lines are experiencing the most downtimes. There's also ways I could potentially improve this. If I have better response times, maybe we can complete more things preventative and therefore reduce the overall downtime. Maybe I can look at recent very high priority work orders and utilize those to determine what the issue was and try to prevent those from happening again to get rid of a large chunk of my reactive downtimes. And I can also see upcoming ones. In fact, I can see I have a work order due in 24 minutes that is unassigned. And that's probably also causing some of my response time delays. There's plenty of ways that you can use screens like this to see metrics of how you're doing, reasons why you might not be doing as well, and what you can do about it. Of course, there is one more component to go with this that does affect everything, and that is, well, having this information in a format that's not just data, but as something that is going to show you how it affects your bottom line. So for example, starting with the maintenance one, all that work order information is going to give me, well, who should be doing what and when. But one of the real values from it is going to be the ability to take that time that is assigned to it, to take the parts that you use, and to be able to assign a dollar value to it so you can justify and understand costs and allocate your resources appropriately. In this example, this is looking specifically at maintenance, but I can see everything that happened in my line 1. I'm grouping it by my specific line assets, and I can see the costs associated with every single asset on my line. At a quick glance, I can tell that my caser has the most expenses associated with it, and I will look over here. It shows me that a lot of it is due to part cost. I can even select it here, and you'll see it highlight them all in gold. And I can see that my caser accounts for about almost $2,700 worth of stuff in the last, well, since the start of last month. If that's too much of a cost, I can compare that to other things. I can compare it to my purchasing history. I can compare it to the actual asset and look it up to see what it costs. And maybe I can justify either having more parts on hand or replacing it entirely, or maybe having more maintenance resources to prevent expensive breakdowns and hopefully do more PMs. There's a lot of ways that this can be used to justify other uses of your resources in a more effective manner. To wrap it up, of course, this isn't related just to maintenance, as I mentioned. This is going to apply to everything. So we can look at it one more time, taking a full step back, where you can look at your spending, look at your expenses, take all the data we have and collected in these implementations, and wrap it up for you in a nice, easy-to-use format. This is an example of a very high-level multi-site overview, where we're not looking at just Orange County Vitamin, which is everything we just saw, but we're also looking at Orange County Medical and Orange County Foods, 2 sister facilities as well. At a quick glance from this, I can see where all my expenses are going and what I may potentially need to be addressing at any of the facilities at any given moment. We're taking a look at things like labor costs, budget spendings for energy as well as maintenance. We're looking at scrap rates on a weekly basis or inventory turnover. We can see daily performance. So how am I performing today with my OEE, and how am I doing according to my current production of where I should be in the day? We're about halfway through, so 2 of them are doing all right, at least. And even my delivery weekly performance. Is my inbound attainment and outbound all about the same, or is there a difference with them? All this information is from various different sections, but with all the context of the data we've collected, there's a lot of overlap where you can take these and use them to augment one another.
This is great, Chris. A lot of these metrics are extremely valuable and allow managers and on up to really work in a strategic manner with the data that's available within the system. So great job walking us through the demonstration. we got to see a few different ways how TrakSYS can really connect to a variety of different data sources and allow you to seamlessly execute across the various supply chain functions, as well as capture performance data to drive those improvements in each of those areas. So TrakSYS is a unified MOM platform capable of delivering a variety of solutions that create a connected data flow and integrated view, not just on the plant floor, but across the entire enterprise. So with that, we want to jump into the Q&A portion of the webinar. Feel free to enter your questions in the GoToMeeting console. If there's any questions we don't get to, we'll be able to answer those, all of the questions, as well as distribute the recording of the webinar following this webinar. So we have a question that came in. It's around configuration of these dashboards. Chris, can you talk about how configurable are these different dashboards and KPIs?
Yes, actually here, let me jump back to one of them so I can give you guys a very quick look and example to it. As you may have noticed, a lot of the screens that you saw are actually around the same look, feel, and formats, and that's actually by design. This is a specific format that we've identified as a pattern that, well, we like and that we can very easily reproduce across multiple sections. So this page, the planning page, this maintenance overview page, they all have a lot of the same similar content, but the actual data behind it is all very different from one another. The way that TrakSYS works is that we do have a lot of out-of-the-box standard content pages that you can instantly deploy, but for a lot of it, you're going to find, well, for most softwares, that the out-of-the-box content is a little limiting. There's probably things that you want to do that are unique to your implementation. So all of these pages that you just saw, all the different reports, are built using what we call a visual page toolkit. The long story short version of this is that everything you see on the page here is a part, and you're able to mix and match them as you would like. This also includes a lot of parts that will gather data for you. So when I build these pages, effectively all I'm doing is I'm taking these pages, I'm duplicating them to another section. So for example, oops, not my quality one actually, maintenance, let's go to warehouse here. I can take this page, I can duplicate it and make it a planning page. Then all I have to do is change out the data source on the back to say, don't look at one metric, look at a different one. So if you have a metric that you want, we just need to identify what it is. We can easily add it to this page, swapping out just one or two parts, but it makes it very easy and repeatable to have as many variants of this as you would like to ensure that the data gets to the right people in the right organizational format for you to make it effective.
Great. We have another question that came up. I'm considering using a BI tool to gather data from several existing software systems and provide metrics across 3 plants. Can TrakSYS help with this?
You want me to take that one?
Okay.
Okay. So in terms of doing it for BI tools and for multiple plants, you can do both. So I'll start with the multi-site portion first, relevant to TrakSYS, and I'll explain integration with a BI tool. But in terms of doing multiple sites, as you saw with my implementation, I did have that one screen that was, well, showing a bunch of sites at once. Sorry, I got a thing in the way. Oh, there we go, where you can see multiple sites. In this case, this report is looking at 3 individual sites, all put together into one implementation. On the other hand, you can also utilize separate facilities, and there is a variant of TrakSYS we call Global Track, essentially, that allows you to take multiple individual implementations and have them communicate together as well. So you have the ability to take these multiple sites and then to aggregate that information into a single large report. In terms of using BI tools tend to excel at the capability to take this information and display it and group it together and provide intelligence around the data. We have the data provided in a format, so just in this backend database that is usually very easy to access, which means it works very well, especially with Microsoft BI tools, but with any BI tool that you would like. This information can be exported to them for use. And in addition, if that BI tool features any front end, you can typically find a way to embed that front end into the software as well. So you have multiple options. You could, 1, simply export the information and use the BI tool natively, or 2, you can even incorporate the BI tool into TrakSYS and have a seamless transition with the two to make it, well, easier to use for the normal operator or user.
Thanks, Chris. We got one more question that came up. Does it work with SAP?
Yes. So Corey had shown a slide previously about the integration aspect of the software, how it uses logic service to talk to the plant floor and whatnot. And one of the services he mentioned was the data management service. The data management service allows us to integrate with other, non-real-time sources, such as an ERP system and SAP. This will allow us to bring in the information that you would like from that system on any regular basis that you would like as well. Typically, this will allow you to incorporate things like product information or job information that can be triggered and brought into our system for utilization, as well as for pushing information back when necessary. The same type of pattern occurs with any other software that you'd like, so not just SAP, but for any other system that you may need to pull information from.
Yeah, and I'd add that TrakSYS is deployed, working with integrated to several different of the popular ERP systems, as well as even the mid-size and smaller. So there's several examples of this out there.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to wrap things up now. So thank you to everyone who wrote in and everyone that joined us here today. As Corey mentioned, the answers to all the questions we received, not just the ones we covered, will be emailed out to you. For anything else, please feel free to contact us at our web address, www.parsec-corp.com. You can see it there on the screen, /TrakSYS. Till next time, thank you guys for attending.